coming. Yeah, that Todd Connor thing, that's pretty funny to me, still. I have a roommate in college who read the book, and I met with him. He lives in Fresno, I met with him a couple weeks ago. And he sat down with me and he goes, well, the biggest thing I want to know is, who is this Todd Connor? He's going to come he didn't come today, he's going to come next week or the week after. And he's already told me what he's going to say. Oh, it's Brian. I'm disappointed.
Are you going to sit?
Well, thank you for being here. Really, I'm a bit overwhelmed by how people have responded to this story. And it's very touching to me. I said that last week to folks that were here. It's very kind of you to be interested in the story. And thank you so much for being here. Today, each week, I'm going to talk a bit about some of the images in the book and how they relate to the things that happen. And talk about Liz a lot. And then I've got sort of an overriding question each week. The first question today is, why does God let bad things happen to good people? Next week will be about forgiveness. How do you forgive when you've been wronged so badly? And then I had quite a journey when I was in my 20s, just a little preview of week 3. All the stuff that happened to me that were in the book, I had this thing called repression. It's where your unconscious mind simply has trauma. Trauma happens to you and your unconscious mind just forgets everything. And I didn't forget chunks of my childhood. All those events that you read about in the book, I had forgotten until I was about 21, 22. And your mind, of course, doesn't forget. In fact, it remembers quite well. You just kind of consciously remember them. And so I went through a whole process of kind of digging out all those memories and then having to really, for the first time in my life, process what happened and how to heal, how to get through that. So that'll be week 3, just how to heal from deep wounds. But I want to start a little bit this morning on why I wrote this book. For years I've told the truth. And actually, you know what? First I want to do a couple things. So I've given you that line. So let's show the next slide. I love this slide. That is Liz. That is, thank you. So that's the pillowy Liz that I knew. And she was wonderful. She's holding her granddaughter. That's about a year before I was born. But that's the Liz of the book and the Liz that I knew. So why I wrote the book? Well, I wrote the book because Jeff told me to write the book. That's why I wrote the book. I kept saying, I'm an accountant. I don't write. Jeff just had it in. He says, you got to write about it. Particularly about this African-American woman, you got to write about her. And to tell your story, you got to write about her. So I just sort of started to write and wrote some things down, passed it around to Jeff and some other people, and they had an interesting reaction. So, well, I've been telling my story since I was in my 20s. I've been telling the truth of my story for 30 years. But I never was able to tell the story in such a way that people were really understanding. And it was weird because I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the true stories, but for some reason, people are just not pulling into it, not grasping it. So, and that creates a tension inside of a person who's had trauma, because part of the trauma is you carry the weight of what happened. And one way of getting rid of that weight is to tell the story and then have people understand and respond to the story. So I was trying to tell the story, but I couldn't get people to respond because I really wasn't telling the story, even as hard as I was trying to do that. And to just give you an analogy, I saw this report a few weeks ago. It was when the Baltimore riots broke out. And I saw 2 clips that the news showed. They showed one clip of African Americans throwing rocks at police, and they said 6 police were injured. And then they showed another clip of this kind of same kind of mob breaking into stores and stealing stuff. And that was it. That was the story. And I remember it because it made me angry, because those were true clips, but it's clearly not telling the truth. And that's the problem with a complicated truth, is you can tell bits and pieces of the truth, and they're true, but they don't really tell the truth. And that was the problem with my story. I was telling true vignettes of what happened, but I wasn't telling the truth because people were not really understanding. So I had to have some kind of different way of telling this truth. And for that, I've studied the scriptures, and I see how Jesus tells the truth so much of the time. When Jesus is going to tell you a truth, like he's going to tell you about God the Father, he doesn't just tell you, well, he's gracious, he's forgiving, he's merciful, he's kind, he's loving. He doesn't use those words. Now, what Jesus does when he's going to tell you something true, he says, well, let me tell you about this Father. And he has this son, and we're going to call him the prodigal son. And he takes a third of the fortune of the father, basically says, I wish you were dead, and runs off, wastes the fortune, finds himself starving, and then realizes, maybe I should go back to dad. And maybe I should just be dad's slave. Maybe he'll at least feed me because I'm starving to death. So he comes back to the father, and the father sees him way off, and the father runs out to him, holds him, cries over him, says, you are not a slave, you're a son. And so from the story, you don't need the words mercy and grace and kindness. You know it. And it's a great way of telling the truth. And you can say, well, is that a factual story? Well, no, it's not. Because God the Father dwells in unapproachable light, according to 1 Timothy. So Jesus uses a metaphor. He uses a story to tell the truth. And with that, I realized this is how I need to tell my story. I need to tell the truth and incorporate all those things that truly happen. And then I need to use some metaphors so people can actually feel the truth. And part of what I'm going to do over the next 3 weeks is I'm going to explain these metaphors that I use and how they were very carefully selected, just like Jesus selects them, that carefully selects his metaphors so that they lead you to the real truth. I needed people to understand so that they could feel what happened, not just hear facts of it. So what are the things that I need to communicate? Particularly the stories about Liz. The backdrop is obviously what I went through as a kid, but the stories about Liz. So what do I need to communicate about Liz? First, she loved us deeply. And secondly, she was a very powerful woman and an amazing hero. And she was so powerful, she stood about that tall. She was wide, as you saw, but that means she couldn't run fast. But she scared the daylights out of my parents. And I don't know how she did it. She was African American. She had no social or political power. She was poor. When she needed to, she scared them. And that's what Liz did. But when my mother, if you've read the book, chapter 7, when my mother attacked me, unfortunately that's quite biographical, when she attacked me, Liz came, and my mother was just this raving lunatic from Sunday when it happened, all the way to Tuesday morning, and then there was this sharp shift in her, and she's terrified now. And Liz sat with me. For 3 days, Liz just sat with me. She'd sing to me, kiss my forehead. She just stayed with me. And the laundry and the dishes got done, but not by Liz. Liz became the head of the household, and my mother became the maid. And she kept coming in. Does he need anything? And she'd say, no. If he needs something, I'll get it for him. She was rude to her. She was angry. And I don't know how she pulled that off, because these people were powerful people, and their egos were big. And she really had no way of pulling the whistle. Blowing the whistle. She just was powerful. Even my sister, who doesn't have the spiritual framework that I have, she describes Liz's power as mystical, spiritual. There was something about her. God just, for me, in my vantage point, God just infused her with power to back off what was happening. And her power over them would moderate my mother for a while. She was very, very much crazy, but it would tame her for a while. The problem with mental illness is it doesn't sustain any taming. It doesn't moderate itself. It is mentally ill. So the abuse went on for quite a while. But I told this big story about Liz. And honestly, as a person who experiences, I don't really think I told the story big enough. To this day, I really don't know how she did it. I don't know how she came to work on Tuesday mornings, knowing what was going on, knowing what she was going to see, that happened to her little white babies, as she called us. I don't know how she stopped crying on her way home. I don't know how she even talked to my parents, much less be polite and pleasant with them most of the time. And honestly, I don't know how she didn't poison their coffee. To be perfectly honest. And then there's this other factor. I don't know how she overcame her own fears. We're talking about a mentally ill woman who crosses a line with her own children and is violent with her own children. In the 1960s, it really is not a far stretch to think, well, it's pretty easy to go violent on the maid. You went violent on your own kids. I don't know how she overcame that. I don't know how she kept coming back. And the final thing that I've contemplated is, I don't know how she did it, was, the truth is, if they were ever discovered, my parents were not going to jail. No, the domestic help was going to jail. If they were ever found out for something that went on in that home, Liz would have gone to jail. Because they would have accused you, just like in the book, I put that in there. So the first half of the book, unfortunately, with what was going on in the home, it's very biographical. It was fairly quick to write because it was so biographical. I wove the abuse together in a story form. It took a little poetic license, but it was very biographical. And I should say as a disclaimer, my sister and brother, Chrissy and Mark in the story, they are reflective of my sister and brother, but the things that happened to them, the things that happened to me are in the story that happened to all of the kids in the story, because I don't want to talk about what happened to them, because that's not I shouldn't do that. They have to tell their own story. But I wanted them in the book because I love them very much. And all of those good attributes about those other little kids, my brother's music, my brother's an amazing musician, and we lived in this strange, contrasted home where we had this ugly darkness going on, but yet Chopin is wafting through the air. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful home. It was a beautiful yard. Everything about it was beautiful except what was happening. So I love my brother. I love how the beauty he brought into the home. My sister, the queen, she's texted me today. She was going to come. She couldn't come. She said, I can't come. I'm sorry. Love queen. And it was important. I mean, I tease her about being the queen because we were always supposed to play king, and we never played king. We always played queen. So I went and got her stuff. I did stuff for her, for the queen. And then I said, okay, it's time to play king. No, I don't like this game anymore. My sister, though, was stronger than me. She was more of a leader than me, and I needed her to be that way. We were very close as kids. When Liz wasn't there, we were survival for one another. So I wrote half the book. It was fairly easy to get there, and then I realized I needed to employ some more metaphors in there, like Jesus does, to tell the truth. And I want to talk about Liz, but she's complicated, and I want to really bring out her bravery, her love, all these things. But I need to incorporate this other writing technique, this other truth-telling. And this other truth-telling involves fiction, if you will. And Lauren Dunzig, who's also a writer, she said, the thing about a fiction writer is they play God. They get to play God. They can have their characters, they can have them say things, they can have stuff happen to them. And there was this junction when I had written the biographical, just the biographical stuff in the first half. The second half is biographical as well, but it's more metaphor. But anyway, I got to this point in the first half, and I realized, okay, I have to employ this other technique of writing that is more like fiction, and maybe I just want to make it fiction. And I had this decision, because there's certain problems with this story that I don't particularly like myself, and other people have expressed that to me. One being the big obvious one is, people have said to me, do you mean to say your parents never paid for this crime? Do you mean nobody ever found out? They got away with this? To which the answer is yes, they did. As the book ends, they did. So there was this moment in time when I thought, maybe I just want to be a fiction writer and at least fix that problem. I had a whole list. There was running over with the bus, there was the drowning, the poisoning, the bolt of lightning. That was good. Because God was involved in that one. That was a fun one. See, I can talk about this today because I don't talk about forgiveness until next week. So, today's retribution. But then I came back to what Jeff told me to do, which was to tell the truth through a story. And I had to tell the truth because I wanted people to know what Liz was really like. And the first part of the book was more of what I went through, but I wanted people to know what Liz was really all about. So I put that list aside and said, no, I'm gonna do this in a truthful way. So then I'm in the middle. I know I got to resolve this. I got to write the rest of the book. I got to figure out where I'm going, which means I got to figure out the end of the story. So the end of the story has to be true. And the truth of the end of the story is that my mother did become disabled in a way. I'll tell you about that. And Liz stayed. Liz stayed with my family. She stayed with me throughout all those years. Liz stayed. But that's the way it needed to end. So in the book, my mother becomes disabled. A lot of people have asked me about that sinkhole. Everybody likes this sinkhole. Yeah, is that true? Yeah, well, they are true. And I'm telling you, the sinkhole is one of the most important pieces in that book that tells some of the biggest truths in that book. But she didn't get disabled in the sinkhole. Sorry if that's disappointing. But it's a very important truth that's being told through that. I will tell you about that next week. But she does become disabled. What happened was, and in a way, it's a better story. What happened was she was coming after one of us. I have a vague memory. It was either me or my sister. I think it was me. And she injured her back. And it was a serious injury. She really was disabled in a way. She couldn't walk that much after that. She couldn't sit in the car. She was in pain the rest of her life. The significant thing was she was disabled, and that she couldn't chase after us any longer. She couldn't grab us. She couldn't drag us. She couldn't hold us down. The abuse abruptly stopped when she became disabled. So there, I knew the end of the book. I had to end the book in that way. So then it was a matter of filling in the rest and trying to tell the truth about Liz, about us, with these metaphors. The first metaphor I want to tell you about is very prominent in the book. It's the Todd's right hand against Liz's brown palm through the window when Liz gets fired. That's a real image. It's a real image. It didn't happen one time. It happened 1,000 times. As a little child, as a really young child, I had this conundrum in my mind that I was so bonded and connected to this woman, but it was just, even as a child, it was so obvious we were different. Because my hand against her skin they're different. So I knew we were different, but yet we were not different at all. We were completely connected. And so that scene of the white hand in the brown palm, it's very significant. Because we were connected, yet we were different. And the window itself is a metaphor. It's like windows give the illusion that you're in the same world as out there. So it looks like this world just continues out there because of the window, but actually the window is separating worlds. That world out there, the air is different, the temperature is different, the lighting is different. That is a different world out there than in here, but it gives the illusion that it's not. And that was Liz and me. We were completely connected, but we were in different worlds. She was African American, I was white. I was rich, she was poor. She was an adult, I was a kid. She had a family, a church, she had community. I had this crazy world I lived in. We were separated in many ways, but yet completely connected. There's one part of the book as related to that metaphor of the white hand against the brown palm that I want to share with you. It was edited out because my editor is a good editor. Her name is Paula Style. She's a great editor. And I was doing this thing where I was stepping out of the voice. Most of the book is told in the voice of a child. Remember that it starts with the funeral, ends with the funeral. This adult says, okay, let me tell you the story, but it's told from the perspective of a child of what happened. And that scene was so significant to me. I had written some stuff, but it stepped out of that voice. And she says, no, it's got to come out. I tried to find other places in the book I couldn't. So I'm just going to share it now. She can cut out the book. I'm going to share it. So at that moment, with the two hands together, here's what the book says. It says, she was unable to form words to, we both held our hands against the glass, white skin against brown. Here there was no color, no race, just love emanating through the glass barrier between us. And what is edited out is, it was 1967, the most racially riotous year in American history, where whites and blacks were at their lowest point of connection. To many it seemed to be an unsolvable rift that could propel American society into a full race war. I often imagine in later years that if Time magazine could have painted my white hand against her brown palm on the front cover, if the world could have felt that connection, it could have ended racial tension forever. The moment felt like it had that power. I like that. The other next metaphor I want to tell you about is Liz. One thing I knew that had to happen in the book to bring out the truth is Liz had to be fired. She technically was never fired by my parents, but every Tuesday and Thursday and alternate Wednesdays, as far as my sister and I were concerned, she was fired. Because we didn't know she was ever. And that one scene that I have where we're again at a window, and the way our house was set up is there was the laundry room where Liz came in and out, and then there was the back door in the laundry room. And right next to the back door was a window. It was low enough that when we were little, we would see Liz there as she left. And then just to the right was the kitchen and dining room area where my mother, when Liz left, was always cooking dinner. So every night, not once, twice, every night, Liz would be ready to leave. My sister and I would go and just try to grab as much love as we could because we had to turn around and then be in that home. So Liz would just be pouring over us. She'd also be giving us those battle instructions, as I put in the book. You mind your mama now. You mind your mama. And it wasn't just nice little sweet things. We knew what it was. And so there's a scene going on. And my sister and I, and we're 4 or 5 years old. We're in tears. Liz, don't go. No, I gotta go be with my family. And then it's well, take us with you. And my mother, my very unstable mother, is making dinner 20 feet away. And she's getting angrier and angrier. We're all kind of seeing those eyes. And so there's this moment where it's just so tense. And then so finally Liz, this is repeated, Liz would then go out the door, turn to the window to still stay connected with us. And that's when we put our hands up there. And she touched both of our hands. Or she tried to make a face to make us laugh. And we're just, love is walking out the window. And the horrible part of it is, as she's trying to pour love into us, in that moment when we're grabbing as much as we can, my mother's getting more and more enraged. And so Liz, while she's trying to be kind to us with all that, she's actually putting us more in danger. And the moment just built, it was just so unsolvable. It was so unsolvable. And I'll never forget, because Liz would stay with us and try to talk sweet to us and pour her love on us. And then at one moment in time, Liz was just gone. She didn't say goodbye. She just turned and moved. And that move, that wasn't easy for that woman to move. So, and my sister and I, we've reflected on it back afterwards. It was weird. She just vanished. She just didn't want to cry in front of us. She saw what the situation was. She couldn't stay because it was going to get worse for us when she left. This is why Liz had to be fired. The reader had to look at this and go, oh my gosh, this woman is never coming back. And these kids are stuck. Because that feeling and that scene happened repeatedly in our home. The other thing I knew that Liz had to do is she had to kidnap us. As wild as that may sound, she had to kidnap us. Because at the moment that she goes to that school and you can see it building to her just taking us from the school and knowing this is kidnapping, what the reader realizes is 2 things. It's like, yes, get these kids out of that home. This feels so good, but this is so crazy. This is so foolish. And I needed that moment in the book because you had to feel how foolish Liz was. She had foolish love. And just as I told you earlier, all those foolish things she did, she had other opportunities and other jobs, but she was just foolish in staying in our home. And I needed the reader to feel how foolish that was. That's really what heroes do. Heroes have the ability to let love drive them when common sense is somehow less important. And I needed you to understand that's what Liz did. Liz didn't do that just one day. And it was as if, honestly, on Tuesdays and Thursdays and every other Wednesday, it was as if she did kidnap us. I have racked my mind in trying to remember things to put in the book. I have racked my mind to try and remember a single time that my mother was present when Liz was there. And I know she was. I mean, she didn't shop that much. And she didn't run that many errands. She was there. I have no recollection of her because she was not important. I was kidnapped by Liz. That was an important scene for me to put in there for people to understand. There's this scene in the Bible where Jesus stands in front of people who are entering heaven. And it's kind of like the Academy Awards. Jesus is going to comment on these people and thank them for all the things they've done for him before they enter heaven. And so all these great people are there. Moses is there. King David is there. All these great people. Like the apostles, every single one of them died for their faith. And Jesus is spending time recognizing these people before they enter heaven. And listen to what they say in Matthew 25, verse 35. It says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." It's an interesting list. I mean, all those great things that people did in the Bible, they're not even mentioned. Things that God is highlighting are the really simple things. You fed me, you gave me water, you kept me company. That sounds great, not to us. I mean, heroes, there were capes. There were aprons. Jesus seems to overlook all those great people that are standing there in that scene. And it talks about people giving cups of water, sharing meals, spending time with people. Heroes, according to Jesus, don't wear capes, they wear aprons, and that's like this. In that scene, I believe he's going to thank a lot of people for cups of water, and he's going to turn to Liz and say, "Thank you for showing up every Tuesday, Thursday, and alternate Wednesdays." And it's a funny thing, I really have a very deep sense of this because we tend to define hero as something great that I do. But as far as I was concerned, I don't think Liz thought she was doing that much. I am so glad she did. It was simple, potentially. Simple stuff. But for me, it was enormous. It saved my life. And then there's this question of why does God let bad things happen to good people? I should have time for another metaphor. This one, we have time for another metaphor. Taught a lot, but I didn't know how this one was structured. I didn't know how long this would be. So there's another metaphor in the book that I loved and I enjoyed, but unfortunately, it's a metaphor. It's Captain James Whitmore. Love that guy. It's so fun to write about. Love him. But unfortunately, he's a character in the book. But there's about five, I think I listed 5 attributes, 5 true things that James Whitmore has to bring out. And he's necessary in the book. The first thing is, Liz has been fired. And I told you why that was in the book. So Liz has been fired, but as a story, I've got a problem. The story has to end with Liz staying. So Liz, we've already established she has no political power, she has no social power, she has no way of getting back in that home. And again, that was critical for the reader to feel that because that's the way it felt when she left. There's no way she's coming back. So I needed something, I needed a force outside of Liz to bring Liz back into that home. Because even if Liz went to the police and found somebody sympathetic, you were still dealing with everything that James Whitmore has to deal with. How do I go up against this prominent white doctor? Career suicide for him. So I had to bring that out. Liz also, it gives the opportunity for Liz to have this monologue about Dr. Connor. Because he has this persona out there. My dad had this persona out there that was just not real. And for me, I needed to have somebody call him on it in a way. And Liz does that. Whitmore says, well, you don't really know who you're talking about, and Liz fires back at him. No, I know exactly who I'm talking about. I do not know that man's socks. I make his coffee. I see what he is, and I know what he is. I see when he's afraid. I know what he's doing. Very important part of the book. Very important truth to bring out. And Liz has this great analysis that, again, I have to tell you what the time period was. I have to not just give you a history lesson, I have to have you feel the impossibility of the time for Liz, or frankly, any African American in that time period. So then she confronts Whitmore and she says, look, the fact that if there was a black woman coming in here telling you about black kids getting hurt, you wouldn't care. Because this is the Oakland police in the 60s, and Jim Crow lives, so you don't care. A black woman comes in telling you about black kids, doesn't matter. Or if a white woman comes in telling you about white kids, you might care. But guess what? It's the 60s. Nobody does that. Nobody challenges the social order. Nobody is going to accuse Dr. Connor of this. And that's a truism. I know a neighbor who knew what was going on and said nothing. So a black woman with black kids, you don't care. A white woman coming in talking about white kids, well, guess what? That's not happening because a white woman's not going to do that. What about a black woman coming in and telling you about white kids? And you're telling me that you're not going to do anything. And it's not because you're not going to do anything about white kids, it's because a black woman is coming and telling you about it. It's the craziness of racism. It makes no sense. And I needed to bring that out in the story. I needed Whitmore on the other end of that dialogue. Other thing that I actually loved about Liz, and frankly I've seen it in other black women, and I love it, is for some reason I think a strong black woman can just school anybody. You're laughing, I think you know what I'm talking about. I had this happen through high school. My friends and I'd be at the store and doing something wrong. Some black woman comes, what do you think you're doing? And it's like, I better shape up. Anybody else did that, I think we'd blow them off. And Liz had this power, she just would school anybody. And I needed to set up a scene. She needs this Captain Whitmore. He's a white police officer who somehow has been somewhat sympathetic, and he's leaning now towards Liz. And then he starts with that salty language of his. And Liz has to say it. She shouldn't say it, but she has to say it. Did your mama teach you to talk like that? To which any intelligent white man has only one response. No, ma'am. She did not teach me to talk like that. So Whitmore was one of my favorite characters, and I really needed to bring him out. And one of the biggest things that Whitmore proves is that the law was of no use in the 1960s in this kind of problem. See, Whitmore doesn't use the law to solve this problem to get Liz back into the house. He manipulates. He's cunning like Liz to get her back there. That was the only way. That would be the only way for this to work. Child abuse in the state of California was not illegal until 1968. Now, our situation was so extreme, if the police ever knew about it, I'm sure they would have done something about it. But then you have to think through, well, what does that mean? So we could have been placed with foster care. We know what a crapshoot that can be. Might have been okay. There was 4 kids. We certainly would have been separated. We could have been placed with relatives. Oh my gosh. You just gotta realize my parents were crazy. My mother was mentally ill. My father, how cold do you have to be? They were not good people. And whatever family created those people, no. There was no scenario that was better than simply staying with Liz. And that's the conundrum that I lived with. That's the problem that I lived with. As I said in the book, we were marginalized and abused, and so was Liz. Us by our parents, Liz by society. And Liz was the best way to make it through. It's one of these questions you have in life. You know, we see problems, we want to fix them in a very clean way. This was not a fixable problem in a clean way. No, we had to live through it. And we had to have Liz. And it brings me to that question, well, why does God let bad things happen to good people? And in this case, children. There's a lot of narratives that I've heard in terms of explaining this world. I lived in Berkeley for 6 years. I heard everything. And actually, even stepping outside of my faith that I land on, I find the biblical answer to what this world is about as the most comforting. And other philosophies, I think, work well for people who don't have my background. I gotta have some answers. I gotta have some answers on how that much darkness could happen to me in my cities. The biblical narrative goes like this. It says that there's this great good and this great evil, and they were at war with each other long before man ever got here. And then it names this guy Adam, and he's the first human being here on this planet. And he's made by the good side, and the good is good. We call God, he's true and loving and caring and kind. And the diabolical evil is at war with him, and he's everything opposite. He's dark. He's evil. He loves strife and hatred. And Adam, for whatever reason, sides with the dark. I'll let you read the story. But to me, as mythical as that may sound to some who don't follow the faith, it's a really good answer for somebody like me. Because I got to figure out, how did my childhood become so dark? And even as Christians, I think we sometimes don't realize the gravity of that story. That Adam handed dominion to this place, to the most diabolical, darkest force in the universe. And actually, I think why we don't feel the gravity of it is because the earth doesn't seem that dark. We've got a beautiful day out there. That's not dark. That's beautiful. There's a lot of beauty in life. There is love and comfort and joy. All those things that are God attributes. But if I read the story, it was all handed over to the dark. So by inference, what that means is that God must be using extreme effort and energy to hold back the dark one. And in fact, the New Testament says exactly that he is holding back evil so that you and I can have a more peaceful life than we would have had if we just simply lived with the full impact of our ancestors. To me, I know there's lots of philosophies. To me, that answers some questions for me. And for you, if you are a person who had a better childhood than me, a lot of people have reflected back to me. Many people in this room have had better childhoods. Most have had better childhoods than me. There actually have been one or two that have said, no, it was similar, unfortunately. Well, let's go with most of you people have experienced love and peace and comfort in childhood, which means by that definition that God has been extra diligent and extra powerful in your life to not have you feel the full impact of what happened to this broken world. So for me, in my mind, I've solved your question. If you had a good childhood, you have no reason to ask, why does God make bad things happen to good people? Because it's quite the opposite. The real question is, why has God been so good and so powerful in making your life as good as it has been? So while I solve your problem, I actually make my problem much worse. So the biblical answer, which I believe by faith, but I also find comforting by philosophy, I actually have a much worse problem than everybody everybody else with a better childhood. Because what it really means is that God took great care to protect you. But he let it unleash on me. He let evil go full throttle. So, I should really hate God. I have a lot of reason to hate God. And I don't. A long ways from it, in fact. And to understand and explain why I don't hate God, in this room, I probably, being arrogant, I probably have the biggest right to hate God more than anybody else in this room, without logic. But to understand why I do not, I have to step out of this right and wrong and this question, and I have to step into the world of healing. Entering the world of healing, what does a hurt person need? I'll just give a really simple example. When a child skins his or her knees, they run to their parent, and the parent just puts a Band-Aid on it and sends them to their room, right? No, of course not. Because their physical hurt is not actually fully healed by the Band-Aid. They need comfort. They need to sit in their parent's lap. They need comfort. And that's the thing about hurt. It's not on the outside. All hurt affects something on the inside. So imagine this child. The scars and the pain and the physical harm for me healed a long time ago. My doctor dad, here's a true statement about my childhood. When I was a kid, I received excellent medical care. Everybody's into healthcare right now. I had better healthcare than any of you. My dad's bandages healed the wounds that broke my heart and left me with scars. And that's the problem. So I can shake my fist at God. How do I shake my fist at the one who heals me? I don't know how to do that. And I found that the answer to that question does nothing to heal a broken heart. And so at some point in time, and I don't want to make it sound like I just never did that. Oh, yes, I did. I did shake my fist. It was part of my healing process. It was part of what I needed to do. And my very kind, very patient God, just like you. And I had these experiences, I'll talk about them in week 3, where I would just scream at God. I encouraged to drive up into the Berkeley Hills. I was so enraged with God. And I would vent this out of me. And then I would feel this mystical love just overwhelm me. I can't explain it. It's mystical. And I knew it was okay. It was okay for me to shake my fist. It was understandable. And at some point in time, I just stopped asking the question and just said, I want to receive love and I want to heal. So the answer to the question is, why does God let bad things happen to good people? The answer to the question is clearly, it's just the wrong question. And as soon as I stopped asking that question and found Him there, as soon as I stopped demanding an answer and realizing that the answer would have left me like my dad, it would have felt like the bandages that scarred me, that didn't heal me. And as soon as I realized that, I received God's love and it all became okay. I'm going to share more about the story and the topics of forgiveness and healing in the next 2 weeks if you come. Usually when the speaker finishes, he closes in prayer, so I'm going to do that real quick, and we'll sing another song. Father, thank you. Thank you that you brought me through. Thank you for Liz. I know that I would never have understood love without her. And thank you, Lord, that you are a good God, and that you have been holding back the forces that created my childhood. You have been holding it back. all of us, including me. Thank you, Father, that you love us that much and care for us. In Jesus' name.